Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into something truly fundamental. How our cells, the tiny building blocks of you and me, actually manage to stay alive. It really all comes down to controlling what comes in and what goes out. So, let's just jump right in with a big question. How on earth does a cell eat, breathe, and take out the trash when it doesn't have a mouth or lungs or, well, any of that? The answer, it turns out, is a work of pure genius.
To really wrap our heads around this, we're going to use a little analogy. Just for this explainer, I want you to picture every single cell in your body as its own super advanced, self-sufficient smart house.
All right, so every house needs walls, right? And it needs doors. Our cellular smart house is no exception. So first up, let's take a look at the very structure that makes all of this possible, the thing that acts as both the walls and a high-tech security system.
This is the cell membrane. You can think of it as the outer boundary, the thing that separates the cozy, perfectly controlled world inside the cell from the wild, unpredictable environment on the outside.
But here's where it gets really cool. This membrane has a superpower, and it's called selective permeability. See, it's not just a wall, it's an incredibly intelligent bouncer at the door, deciding exactly who gets in and who has to leave.
Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of how things get through, it's really helpful to just look at the two main strategies the cell uses. On one side, you've got movement that is totally free, costs zero energy. And on the other, you have movement that the cell has to work for and pay for. So let's start with the easy one, the path of least resistance. This is how the cell gets a lot of what it needs without spending any energy at all. It's the most efficient way to do business. This effortless entry, which we call passive transport, really happens in three main ways. You can think of them as three different kinds of automatic doors on our smart house. So the key takeaway here is it's all about natural flow. Things just move from where it's crowded to where it's less crowded. Tiny molecules like oxygen can just slip right through the wall. That's simple diffusion. But slightly bigger molecules, they need a special doorway, a protein channel, to help them get across. We call that facilitated diffusion. And then there's water. Water is so vital for life, it gets its own VIP lane. It has a special, dedicated kind of passive transport called osmosis, and its whole job is to keep the water balance inside the cell just right.
Okay, but what if the smart house needs to bring in something that's really rare outside? Or what if it has to pump out waste into an area that's already full of it? What happens when you have to move something completely against its natural flow?
Well, that's where active transport comes in. This is when the cell has to roll up its sleeves and fire up the machinery. It's basically like installing an electric pump to force water uphill, moving things from where there's not much of it to a place where there's already a lot. Now, this process is absolutely crucial for grabbing those scarce nutrients or kicking out toxic stuff. But it's not free. It always has a cost. The cell has to spend its energy currency, a molecule called ATP, to power these special protein pumps. Okay, so we've covered the mail slot and the regular doors. But what about the really big stuff? How does our smart house get a refrigerator delivered or ship out a giant piece of furniture? The normal doors and pumps, they're just not going to cut it. To bring in a huge delivery, the cell gets really creative. It uses a process called endocytosis. The membrane itself literally reaches out, wraps its arms around the particle, and pulls it inside, creating a little bubble to carry it in. It just engulfs its target. And to get big stuff out, well, it just does the exact same thing, but in reverse. This is called exocytosis. A little bubble filled with waste or maybe proteins it's made travels to the outer wall, merges with it, and poof, it releases its contents into the outside world. I know this all might sound super microscopic and abstract, but I can almost guarantee you have seen these powerful biological principles in action, probably in your own kitchen. Yep, this whole idea is at the very heart of one of the oldest food tricks in the book. It's what connects this high-level science to something you've definitely had on a sandwich: pickles. Think about it. When you pile a bunch of salt on cucumbers, you're creating a super salty environment on the outside. So what does all the water inside the cucumber cells do? It rushes out to try and balance the scales. That is osmosis right there in your kitchen. And it's what keeps the vegetable preserved and gives it that amazing crunch. So let's do a quick recap of the tools in our cells toolkit. We have passive transport for the easy downhill flow. We've got active transport, the energy-powered pumps for moving things uphill. And for the really big stuff, we have bulk transport. And that brings us to the end, but I want to leave you with one last thing to chew on. If every single one of our cells is a sophisticated smart house managing its own tiny world, then what's the city that connects all of them? What's the system that gets trillions of these houses to work together to build, well, to build you?